Well, good morning everyone. I'm going to actually, we hadn't planned this, but a lot of what I'm going to say is going to fit in really well with what's just been said. I'm not sure what the mix here this morning is of people from business and people from education and schools. People from education and schools certainly know that we've got a new Ofsted framework coming out. Well, it is out, it's there in the public domain, and it starts from September as our Bible for inspecting schools. I'll start with a message from the famous Sean Harford, who's our Director of Education and in charge of it all, really, the new framework that is. And this was his message recently. It's great that National Careers Week is again shining the spotlight on the importance of good careers advice. Getting advice right to set our young people on a path to success in life is vital and something we'll be paying close attention to in the new Ofsted inspection framework for September 2019. So what I want to do this morning is maybe illustrate just a little bit about how we will be doing that by just highlighting some elements in the new framework that are particularly relevant. So, in the new framework, personal development is standing on its own. At the moment in the old framework, it's personal development and behaviour and welfare. Personal development is now separated out in the new framework, and it's where this area of what I would call the curriculum fits in, because as Jeff says, the EBAC, the GCSEs are not the curriculum. It's everything that the school does is the curriculum. There's been a little bit of confusion come in because we've got another section in the framework that's maybe taken a lot of the publicity and a lot of the profile, which is the quality of education. And the quality of education is actually only going to be dealing with part of the curriculum, sort of formally assessed part. And everything else has been sort of pushed into personal development judgment. And there's a whole list of things actually under that judgment. I've just picked out this: provide an effective careers programme in line with the government's statutory guidance on careers advice. It offers pupils unbiased careers advice, nothing new there. Experience of work. Now we're explicitly saying that, and that is new in our new framework. Experience of work is now in the Ofsted framework, which is quite interesting because I led a survey a couple of years ago, which I'll come back to in a minute, which demonstrated about half secondary schools are doing it and about half secondary schools aren't. So that will be a bit of a challenge. And contact with employers to encourage people to aspire, make good choices, and understand what they need to do to reach and succeed in the careers to which they aspire. So basically what today is about is in the new framework. Now, under personal development, this is the grade or the relevant aspects for the grade descriptors for good. So we are explicitly saying the curriculum extends beyond the academic, vocational or technical, and provides for people's broader development. Schools work to enhance people's spiritual, moral, social and cultural development is of a high quality. Okay, well that might not seem directly relevant, but I think it is actually. The curriculum and the school's effective wider work supports pupils to be confident, resilient and independent. That's sort of word that I would use but wasn't included in the framework wording, unfortunately. Employability skills. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have said unfortunately, should I? It's perfect. The school provides, and just taking a note. The school provides a wide range of opportunities to nurture, develop and stretch people's talents and interests. That's all their talents and interests. And so that forgotten third that we're talking, that Jeff's been talking about, really important. And it's a wide range of opportunities for all pupils. And I'm going to come back to that in just a second. So I think this is the key for us. But secondary schools, this is straight from the handbook, the secondary schools prepare pupils for future success in education, employment and training. And I think Gatsby benchmarks has been the big push. Because that's now being promoted by the government, it was an agreement between DfE and Ofsted that this should have much higher profile and we're actually, this came in through the development of, it wasn't there originally, and it's come in through the development of the framework with a bit pushing, that we actually have taken on board the Gatsby benchmarks, making explicit reference to them, to develop and improve their careers education provision, enable a range of education and training providers to speak to pupils in years 8 to 13. And then it's just repetitive about the unbiased information and potential next steps. Of course, this also includes opportunities for things like university technology colleges to be brought to the attention of pupils. So again, good criteria. In order for us inspectors to judge whether a school is good, we use a best fit approach. There's a reason why I've put that in there, which I'll come to in a second. In order for personal development to be judged outstanding, and this is the reason I put it in there, because the good judgment is best fit, but for the outstanding judgment, you've got to meet all of the good criteria securely and consistently, and it must also meet the additional outstanding criteria. So what are they? So the highlighting is mine. The school consistently promotes the extensive personal development of pupils. The school goes beyond the expected. And I think, although some things that you may be doing in school, where you're thinking this is really good input into the wider curriculum, but it's not explicit in the Ofsted framework, well, I think this is where you can actually use what you do to help go for that outstanding grading for personal development, because it goes beyond the expected, so that pupils have a wide, rich set of experiences, opportunities for pupils to develop their talents and interests are of exceptional quality. And then the next one's important too, because again it comes back to that forgotten third. The most disadvantaged pupils consistently benefit from this excellent work. So it's not some activities that the same old pupils who get involved in everything else get involved in. It's how deep is your provision going? And how do you monitor that? If you're I often ask when I'm in schools, okay, so that sounds good, what's the take-up? Are there pupils here who actually don't engage in any of these wonderful activities you're putting on? Do you know? So it's a case of monitoring what pupils receive. School provides these rich experiences in a coherent, planned way. I've just, in the spring edition of the Economic Business and Enterprise Association's Subject Association's Journal, I just put in an article that just traced back through about 15, possibly 20 years of Ofsted reports into this area. And a consistent theme comes through that schools often do quite a lot actually in terms of enterprise and work-related learning, but it's very incoherent. It's not planned well enough because schools don't have an idea of the experiences, the knowledge, the understanding that they want their pupils to have in this area by the time they leave. So I'll say to pupils, what's enterprise mean to you? And they'll say, oh, we went off site in year 7. Well, yeah, we went off site, we made something in matchsticks. And sorry for those of you who've heard this anecdote before, because I keep using it, because I think it's pretty powerful. And then in year 8, oh yeah, I remember, we went off site, we made something in matchsticks. So what are you doing in year 9 then? We went off site and made something in matchsticks. And there's no sort of progress involved because nobody's taken an overview of the learning outcomes they want. And this is new. The way the school goes about developing people's character as exemplary is worthy of being shared with others. I think that's all important, but it relies on people. Really, it's probably an area where the school's got to point out to the inspector what they're doing. Now, as I said, a couple of years ago, I wrote this report, Getting Ready for Work, published December 2016, followed a survey, and I just remember, you just reminded me, Jeff, of being in Michael Wilshaw's office, and he said, Adrian, do you know what? schools in this country did pretty well by 2/3 of pupils, and even if you take a comprehensive school, even a best one that we're going to grade as outstanding, they'll probably they'll probably have 70% of their pupils maybe getting a 5A star to C at GCSE in old money. What about the others? What are schools doing for the others? Have a look at that. So that was the report. And Michael Walshaw, you know, for all his abruptness and his image, I inspected Michael Walshaw's school when he was the head at Mossbourne, and he was a fantastic head teacher. And I went into that, inspected that school thinking, yeah, it's all going to be about academic standards, and it was all about academic standards, true. But back in those days when I inspected it, we just had this thing called Every Child Matters. Yeah, everyone remembers that. and one of those was about economic well-being. And I remember, okay, so we've got to have a look at this and enterprise, and I suppose the school will be doing very much of it. They was outstanding in that, as they were in everything else, frankly. So what we found in the survey, Getting Ready for Work, is the extent to which schools use their curriculum to prepare pupils for the world of work is largely dependent on whether school leaders considered it to be a priority. I don't think that would have changed in the last 2 years. Even where schools were delivering enterprise education, it was often unclear whether it was having any impact on people's knowledge, understanding and skills. And so this article where I traced the history of what we've said about enterprise, I partly wrote it really to say, for internal consumption in Ofsted, to say actually we're talking about knowledge-rich curriculum and knowledge being important, and we've been banging on about that in enterprise. It might not be where you'd be expecting it, but we've actually been banging on about that for decades. That actually enterprise, yeah, it is skills, but it's underpinned by business and economic understanding and financial capability. It's an old definition that came up with by the Deering Review of Enterprise Education in the 1990s. I think it's a good one. And even where schools were delivering education, oh yeah, I've said that one, and opportunities for people to take part in meaningful work-related learning or work experience were limited at Key Stage 4. We found it was about 50-50. Business involvement in some of the schools we visited, it relied too heavily on the personal network of teachers and parents, potentially resulting in disadvantaged pupils missing out. So, interestingly, while I was doing this survey, Sean Harford's son was doing work experience. His school did do work experience, and he was doing work experience. Guess where? At the Ofsted office, which kind of illustrates, you know, if you've got the contacts. I came across some pupils who'd done their work experience in a D8's office in America. Yeah, really exciting stuff. Others who great experiences in the City of London, and in the same school, others were, well, don't actually have any of those contacts, so here's what you can find at the last minute. And we involved business organisations, CBI, in this survey, and the people told us, actually, because the structures that used to be there have been dismantled, the landscape's actually quite chaotic. I know the careers and enterprise companies trying to bring some coherence to that, but I think it's very much a work in progress. So Michael asked me to look at apprenticeships because he is pretty negative about apprenticeships. What I found was that he thought schools weren't promoting them. What I found was that actually schools are now getting pretty good at promoting apprenticeships, particularly to 18-year-olds. The problem was partly students wouldn't want to do them. There are various reasons for that. And at age 16, it's really quite difficult, quite hard work. And then previous Ofsted national reports have identified good age-appropriate enterprise education in primary schools. A lot of good work goes on in primary schools. In fact, quite often, you know that Key Stage 3 dip that we've talked about in various, I found that in this area as well. Good work goes on in primary school, it then gets just forgotten about in year 7 and 8, and then maybe gets reintroduced perhaps in Key Stage 4, when it's often too late actually. And so we make these recommendations, just in conclusion. So we recommended secondary schools ensure there's a coherent programme, keyword there, coherent, to develop enterprise education, including economic business knowledge, understanding and skills of pupils. Develop stronger links for business. I think the key thing we found talking to businesses, I remember most businesses are not great big multinationals who've got departments ready for this. They're local employers struggling to keep in business. So schools have to be more aware of the way businesses operate, and businesses are unaware of the way schools operate, and the fact that if somebody's teaching, they're teaching and they can't come and take your phone call. So there's that culture mismatch there. We'd like schools to make most effective use of their teachers who've got some expertise, and ensure that all teachers involved in delivering have access to appropriate professional development, because that really is lacking. And ensure that programs have effective mechanisms for monitoring and assessing progress. So know what you want to achieve, really, just like anything else in the curriculum. And say to head teachers, is there any other element? So you're doing this enterprise stuff, this work-related learning stuff, and it's taking time in your curriculum. Is there any other area of the curriculum where you'd have absolutely no idea where what you're doing is actually achieving anything? Because too often that's the case. And that's the standard Ofsted effort.